Thank you again. I'm now very pleased to introduce our next speaker. Lesley Allman, MBA, Lesley Allman, MBA, set up Allman Communications in 2010 and has since helped over 50 major organizations to better communicate and engage their audiences. Her recent work with Carlsberg and No. 7 Beauty Company won her Institute of Internal Communication and Communicate magazine awards. Previously, she was Director of Corporate Communication at Britain's largest brewer, Coors Brewers. I wonder if that came with some beer on the side. I would hope so. And she was Head of Communication at Premier Foods. Nothing like coming to a day like this to make you feel just, inadequate by comparison. Wow. In 2021, it continues, she wrote the Amazon bestseller, Better Internal Communication, How to Add Value, Be More Strategic, and Fast Track Your Career. It has been shortlisted for the Business Book of the Year Awards 2022. She's a fellow of the Institute of Internal Communication and a winner of numerous internal communication and engagement awards, including for her work with Carlsberg and No. 7 Beauty Company. Here today speaking on A Seat at the Table, Transformation of Internal Communicators, please join me in welcoming the amazing Lesley Allman.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Conscious I'm only thing standing between you and lunch, but question before we start. Anybody here a freelancer? Put your hand up if you're a freelancer. Yes, there's a few of you. So earlier in the week, we heard Susie Dent from Countdown speaking, and she said that a freelancer is someone in the medieval times who was free to use their lance wherever they needed to. And after this morning's session, I think we possibly all need a lance or some sort of weapon, because we heard Jenny talking about the revolution in internal comms. And we heard Lara saying there's a minefield in messaging. And then we heard the panel saying the battlefield that we're all going into these days. And Trudy and Kate just then were talking about the challenges faced in the boardroom and the C-suite. And it's tough. It's tough out there. And we're basically working in a very tough environment, especially the last couple of years. So the good news is that the next session is all about giving you some weapons, 25 minutes to give you some weapons that you can take back into the workplace and apply, and hopefully win the battles of the boardroom. So yes, weapons in the guise of tools and techniques rather than bombs and bullets. So I've just realised I left my clicker over here, so I shall click away. I think you've heard all of this already, but basically I did 10 years in-house, senior level, 10 years as a consultant. So I've sort of seen and learned a lot over the years, and it's really interesting to come and hear other people speaking, because even though you've seen and learned a lot, you can always see and learn lots more. So already today I'm doing that. But this time, 2020, I was actually listening to Voices 2020 virtually online, because we were all confined to barracks, to continue the metaphor, at that point in time. And as was just said, I was working for Carlsberg Beer Company, and also for Evergreen Garden Care, who were a hospitality, horticulture company selling products in garden centres. And March 2020, basically all the pubs and all the garden centres closed down. So suddenly I was very quiet for the first time in decades. So I had the luxury of being able to have time to think and to learn and to sort of contemplate where we were in the world of internal comms. And as a result of that, I wrote this book, Better Internal Communication. And the idea is it's helping people, sharing what I know and what I learned during that time from all the wonderful people who did seminars and webinars, and that I could access all over the world, including staff-based voices. So it's better internal communication, but we're talking about how to add value, how to be more strategic, and how to fast-track your career. So basically the idea is the tools you need to get that seat at the table, to have the gravitas, as Trudy called it, to knock on those senior doors and they open them and listen to you. So a couple of hopefully useful tools and techniques you can use and take away with you. So I'll pop the book down. There is, at the end, an opportunity to win this copy of the book, so I don't have to take it all the way back to Derbyshire with me. So I'll ask a question at the end on that. Okay. So I think somebody said this morning, we used to be considered the post box of the organisation. And that's very much the case. Certainly when I first started in internal comms, it was, can you just comms this out? Can you just bung this out to people? You know, all the sort of phrases that we love to hear as strategic internal communicators. And yes, that is part of what we do, but it's been recognised much more recently that there's more to it than that. And actually, internal communication is so valuable in terms of having an impact on employee engagement, organisational culture, and obviously productivity. So it's all about the bottom line. I'm just distracted because a message just said, can you remove your earring because it's making the speaker? So I'm just about to remove my earring, which is something I haven't ever done at a conference before. So, although when I was somewhere the other day, Gihan, who's here, pointed out that she only wears one earring, so I'm now down with the trend. So. Okay, so yes, we all know, everyone in this room knows the value of internal communication, but sometimes people in organisations don't. So what we're going to cover, 4 things: engaging our employees, very briefly, how to be more strategic by stepping up your knowledge, thinking and delivery, and this is the ABCDE model, which is in the book, how to focus on what's add value and stop doing what doesn't. And, oh, that one says how to focus on what adds value and stop doing what doesn't. That's the how to get the seat at the table one, that should be. So, engaging your employees. There's only one slide on this, but this is what it's all about, really. And I know Jenny said earlier, internal comms and employee engagement aren't the same thing, but as the CIPD have just pointed out, we play an important role as internal communicators in engaging our employees. But really important message, if you take one thing away, and I know you know this already, but if your bosses take one thing away from this session, it is simply telling people is not enough. So to really engage employees takes time and it takes involvement. So quite often you'll get a leadership team who'll go away and, you know, put wet tea towels on their heads and sit in darkened rooms for months on end and then come out with the answer, whatever it is, and then say, can you comms this out? And, you know, with the best will in the world, you're going to get maybe to that bottom rung of the ICE model here. So you'll have informed people and they'll be possibly aware of whatever these guys have come up with. Usually guys, I hasten to add. These folks have come up with, I should say. If you spend a bit more time and involve them a bit more, they'll understand it. If you spend a bit more time and involve them even more, they'll possibly even buy into it. But if you really, really think about how to involve and engage your people, they will know what to do, they'll understand it, they'll know what to do, and they'll want to take action. And that's the only way you're going to get behaviour change. So if you take this model into the C-suite, they really get it, and the penny drops, and they think, oh yeah, we don't need to just comms this out. We do actually need to involve our people, get them to buy into this, and then we might have a hope of them actually changing their behaviour and doing something differently, which actually is what we go into work every day to do, really, as long as that thing, the behaviour change, is aligned to our organisational strategy. So, yes, don't just tell people stuff. Make sure they're properly involved and engaged so that they can change their behaviour and do what's needed to deliver growth and success to your organisation. So that's point 1. Point 2, how to be more strategic. This is a model, and there is a little worksheet, and if anybody wants to have a copy of the worksheet, you come see me at lunchtime. But basically, it's A, B, C, D, E, so it is as simple as it can get. And the idea is that if you take your internal customers, whether it's somebody who comes to you and says, can you do this comms campaign with me, or the whole strategy, or the whole organisational change piece, whoever comes to you and says, can you help me with this comms, then you'll be able to go through this model, and it'll give you a framework to be strategic, because it's impossible to have gone through these steps and at the end of it be tactical, unless something goes sadly wrong. So, ABCDE model, and there's an and beyond, which is the stuff that didn't fit neatly into ABCDE. I was originally going to call the book The A to Z of Internal Communication. Then I realized after about F and G, you sort of start talking about xylophones and zebras and things, and it's not all that helpful. So A, B, C, D, E, and beyond. So A, really, really important place to start, and I feel as if I'm preaching to the converted here, but audience, always start with the audience. It's amazing how many people come to me, client organizations, or when I was in-house customers, and they'd say, Lesley, can you make me an intranet? Can I have a new platform? Can we have a video? So basically, they're coming to you with the answer, the solution as they see it, and they're not the experts in internal communication. Basically, you are. So we don't go to our finance people and say, can you do me a spreadsheet or whatever? You sort of expect them to advise you because you're the experts, but everyone thinks they're an expert in internal communication. So they always have the answer. So by and large, they'll come to you with an answer, but push back and say, who's the audience? So who are the audience for this? And really understand your audience. And there's lots of tools and techniques for doing this. People are familiar with stakeholder mapping. People talk quite a lot about personas these days. So I know I worked with a logistics company, and they always they get to understand a persona called Dave the driver. And whenever they did anything, they thought, well, what will Dave make of this? So instead of just thinking of everything from the sort of office point of view, put yourself in the shoes of your actual audience. When I worked in booze, actually, slight aside, when I worked on Tennant Super Strength Lager, we had 3 personas for the drinkers, and they were the users who liked a bit of alcohol before they went out to get the party started. They were the connoisseurs who liked the taste of it, and they were the abusers who were the people who saw on park benches drinking it. So sadly, the abusers were the very small minority, but they were the visible ones, so everybody thought only abusers drank Tennant Super. But in terms of marketing, understanding the audience is really important, and I think we can learn a lot from our marketing colleagues in terms of how we communicate with our audiences and how we segment our audiences. So who we're trying to reach, and also who are the potential blockers and enablers. So, who are your allies? I think Trudy talked about the chief exec's PA. These are the sort of people you want on side when you're planning your comms. So A for audience. Next one, B. B is for behavior. So if we've done the who are we communicating with, then behavior is the why. Why are we communicating? And again, when people come to you, they'll say, can you just comms this out? And the question is always why? What are you trying to achieve? What behavior change are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to get people to do, say, think or feel differently? And until you understand that, you can't really start to think about the how and the what. So really getting to grips with it, and don't be fobbed off by the first answer, which is because they need to know, or I want to get this out, or it's on my list of KPIs or whatever to tell people this stuff. Really delve in. And I think Trudy and Kate were talking about gravitas. Part of what we're trying to do in terms of adding value is to have that gravitas and be that trusted advisor, so we can have these conversations with people and push back on them and say, but why, until you get to the point that actually you understand what they are trying to achieve. And this comes in really handy later on when you come to measure whether you've been successful or not, because unless you know actually why you're doing it, you might know it's gone out and certain people have clicked on it and certain people have liked it, but what you don't know is anybody's done anything different, whether they do think, say, feel, or do anything differently as a result of it. So really important to take the time to understand what behavior you're looking for. And there's a little bit about motivation theory as well in the book, which is it's useful to know. You don't need a PhD in it or anything, but quite handy to understand about carrots and sticks and all that sort of thing. Whether telling people, if you do this, things will be better, works, or whether if you don't do this, things will be worse, works, or a bit of both. So that's B for behavior. C is the content. So eventually we get onto the bit that we internal communicators love, because we're very comfortable in the world of content. And we did used to always sort of own the content, and that was quite a powerful place to be, because we could put the words in the mouth of the senior people and almost sort of, create the narrative for the organisation. And there's still a really important role for us in doing that, but these days it's much more about co-creating and curating. So we have to decide what role we're playing. Are we the content creators? Are we co-creating? So going back to the ICE model, are we involving people in helping us to come up with the narrative? Or indeed, are we letting other people create the content? And then our role's very much more curation and orchestration, as someone was talking about earlier. So we're making sure that it doesn't turn to chaos, and that actually, if you're giving people a voice, then it's still orchestrated in a way that makes sense and links back to the organizational strategy. So in the middle of there, I actually got this from Voices. Steve Crescendo spoke 2 years ago, I think, at this event, and he's got the 6 C's of content. So will it connect? Is it clear? Is it compelling? Is it in context, and is it concise? That's 5. We communicators never good at numbers, are we? Much better at words. The 5 C's of content, so check those, and check it against your audience, and check it against your behaviours, because it might make sense to you. Always write things for the audience, not for the approvers. Because you could think, this is marvellous, I've crafted these beautiful words and my boss loves them, but Dave the driver might think, what the heck are these guys on about? So always do some checking in before you send things out. So that's C for content. D is delivery. At last we get to the bit where people usually start, which is, how are we going to get this out to people? And, everybody in this room is blessed with the most communication channels we've ever had, and things like, the fabulous staff-based suite of tools that they were showing us earlier. Literally getting things out to people isn't a problem. Selling the idea in and getting the funding for them, etc., might be the problem, but having a range of tools available to us isn't. But really important to remember, it's not just online. And I think somebody said earlier, I think it was Jenny was saying, and I've got a real bugbear about this, the amount of conversations about hybrid working and this sort of thing, which all just focuses on people who sit at desks. And there's so few people sit at desks in the workplace. So, there's people who work out on railway lines and in hospitals and schools and hospitality, and these people never sit at desks. So sending things online isn't ideal, although obviously you can push things out to their mobiles now. I had a great example with a railway company that I was doing a comms audit for, and they said, how well is our stuff getting through to the guys on the front line? And I said, well, it's not. These guys work night shift and they dig holes, and the only tool they've got with them is a spade. And if you they said, oh, well, if you give them a laptop, they'd stick it on the end of a stick and dig a hole with it. So, and I said, that might have been true, but actually, as a result of the pandemic and lockdown, everybody's ability to use a mobile phone massively increased. And because you had to go into a pub and use a QR code to order your beer, so suddenly these guys, as they were talking about this very sweeping generalization of these guys out on the line, did know how to use QR codes, and were familiar with using their mobile phones. And when I asked them if they'd like to have company comms through their mobile phones, they were all delighted and said, well, oh yeah, we use it for our kids' homework all the time. And there's a sort of impression that because people aren't sitting at desk, they're not connected, but they can be. However, don't forget verbal communication and print communication. And we've heard a lot today about the importance of line managers and leaders, and they are still, in my opinion, the number one communication channel that we've got. So building their capability, building their confidence, helping them look good, helping them do a good job is such a massively important part of our role. And we should spend, I'll talk about it shortly, but spend some time figuring out how much time we spend doing what, but a large amount of our time as internal communicators should be helping leaders and line managers to be a better comms channel, two-way comms channel for employees. So, and then two-way is a really important point there as well. So actually, do we have two-way channels, and are we really listening to them? And then when we've listened, do we actually do anything about it? So, some important questions there. E, evaluation. So what does success look like? What does good look like? And if we've got B right at the beginning, if we manage to define properly our objectives, then this should be really easy. So what measures do you need? It's not about clicks and likes. They're a good indicator. They give you some data. But actually, it's much more about what happened next. What was the impact of your comms? And I think Patrick was talking about that earlier with the new suite of tools. It's moving from just informing people to really making an impact. And that's what we should be measuring, really. What difference did we make? Because when we come on to talking about, the boardroom and having a seat at the table, then we have to be able to demonstrate that we've made an impact, not that we've just created some click-throughs. So, and what next? So how will we demonstrate that what we've done makes a difference, and what do we do next? So E, A, B, C, D, E is the model, but then there's not a slide for it, but there is a one called and, beyond. So very quickly, that's F, and this is really important, and everyone in the room will know this. F for funding. Who's going to pay for it? How much is it going to cost? How are you going to get the money? So there's some advice in the book about that, and particularly if you're in-house, getting your timing right in terms of knowing the budget cycle and making sure you get the funding before you go and, don't go and ask for £500,000 in the middle of the year, or you're unlikely to get it. And then massively shoehorning the model. G is for good timing, or GMT if you're in the UK. So, when to get involved in the conversation, when to send out the comms. And in my opinion, it's don't wait for the cake to be fully baked. Tell people the recipe. Tell people how long it's going to be cooked for. Tell people what you can tell them as soon as you can tell them is the generally good principle here. So F and G, and after that, the alphabet fell by the wayside. So that's the model. Two short other things to talk about. One is how to focus on what adds value and stop doing what doesn't. And I know I've heard it mentioned today, loads of people saying, can you do my barbecue poster? Can you do my charity raffle? And we internal comms people are really nice and kind, and we love being helpful. So we always say, yes, of course we can. And then you suddenly find that you're spending half a day doing somebody's charity barbecue poster instead of actually doing value-adding, strategically aligned communications. And guess what? You're not going to get a seat at the table as a result of that. So this is one of the things I use. It's a day in the life exercise. And you could do this with the comms team, but you can also do it with your audience as well, actually. It's really useful for that. So if you've got a comms team, have a little brainstorm, figure out what you're spending all your time doing, and put that along the top, activity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then get them to fill in timesheets, basically. What are they spending their actual time doing? So if you do it for one day, it's a day in the life. If you do it for a week, it's a week in the life, Dilo and Wilo. And I did this with Capgemini, the comms team at one of the Capgemini businesses. And they were absolutely astounded to find that they spent most of their time in meetings and chasing people for approvals and that sort of thing. So literally no time left in the week to be doing anything strategic or value-adding. And once you have that data, you can really figure out then, is that the right stuff? Are you actually spending your time on the right things? And what could you stop doing that no one would notice? What could you delegate? And how else, just think of ways you could free up time so you've got a bigger proportion of your time spent on doing strategic stuff. And as I said, you can do this as well, for example, with line managers, and figure out how much of their time they're spending, how much time they've got to spend on comms, and it's a minus amount of time, basically, because they're spending 110% of their time doing other things. So when we say, ask your line manager, or, your line manager will cascade this, then there's a very good chance they won't if you look at the data of what they spend their actual time on. So your comms team now knows what it's spending their time on, and they want to spend more time on doing strategic stuff. So how do you go about that? It's easier said than done, obviously, when senior people come in and say, I want this and I want it now. But if there's stuff you just absolutely have to do, then definitely this is another three Ps. If it's stuff you should be doing, then just publish it, get on with it, get it out of the way, take it off your list, and then focus on other things. Don't dwell on it. For the stuff you shouldn't be doing, then pass, just say no, and see what happens. Be brave, be courageous, be bold. But for the stuff you should be spending the most of your time on, then promote it, push it up your priority list, put it on the top of your to-do list, and do that first before you do all the other tactical things. Because sometimes it's quite nice to tick a few nice, easy things off your list, isn't it? And then suddenly it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you haven't actually got round to doing that major strategic piece of work that was top of your list when you came in the morning. So focus on pass, publish, promote. And then learn to say no. So in my office, I've got a poster, Anthony Burrell poster, and he's the guy who did Work Hard and Be Nice to People. But the poster I've got says, say yes more than no. And actually, that is my sort of mantra in life. And, you know, if anybody says, do you fancy doing this? I go, yes, I'll be there. And, you know, it's very knackering sometimes. But in life, that's a good mantra. In IC, it's better to say no sometimes, because otherwise you will end up doing the charity barbecue poster. And it's a really important skill. And when I had in-house teams, we used to spend quite a lot of time working on this. And it's helpful if you have some sort of clear signed-off strategy. And I know the percentage of that was quite low on the stats that were shown this morning, but if you've got a very senior signed-off comms strategy or manifesto that you can gauge whether you say yes or no against that, then it gives you a sort of, it empowers you to say no, basically. So this is not what, you know, we're focusing on this because this is our manifesto, our mandate. So yes, say no more than yes, the opposite of what my poster says. So, getting a seat at the table is literally, I think I say in the book actually, if you're having a conversation with comms people or listening to a comms webinar, then the phrase having a seat at the table comes up within about the first 5 minutes usually. And over lockdown, I did hear a lot of people saying, it's amazing, we've got a seat at the table. And it was true, we did have a seat at the table, but it was a crisis, and it was for tactical reasons. So the reason we had the seat at the table wasn't because we were strategic advisors, it was because they needed us to send stuff out. So we can't be deluded into thinking that because we had that seat at the table then we can keep it, unless we continue to add value and be more strategic. Because, amazingly, business leaders are not interested in internal communication. They literally don't care. All they want to know about is what it can deliver for them. So what we need to do as internal communicators is to understand what's keeping them awake at night. And the really good news is that one of the things that's now keeping them awake at night is workforce and employee engagement. So at least we're on that radar now. What's their strategy? What is it that they care about? Is it growth? Is it innovation? What is it? And then what do they need employees to do to deliver that? Because our job is to get those employees to a place where they understand what they have to do and they're doing it because they're engaged in the process. And that flows through to the bottom line, and that's when we start to add value, and that's when we get a seat at the table, and that's when we're trusted advisors. And we're not knocking on their door, they're knocking on ours at that stage and saying, we need your help. Because if you focus your time, effort, and budget on delivering the behavior change, going back to that ICE model, instead of just telling people stuff at the bottom left-hand corner, then you'll be helping them to deliver their strategy. And that gives you the gravitas, the permission to have that seat at the table. Final slide, I think, is to be taken seriously. So in order to do all that, it's all well and good having the theory and the tools and the weapons in your armory, but you do need some business acumen. So listen to their language, learn their language, speak their language. I was talking to somebody the other day who said one of the most useful things they'd ever been on was finance for non-financial managers, and then you can have a sensible conversation with the people with the purse strings. Accountability, so going back to measurement, the E. Courage. I've heard a lot of people today talking about being bold, and I think being bold is a really important part. Obviously, if we're in this battlefield, then we have to be bold. But all the leaders I've ever worked with massively respect you if you challenge them, as long as you do it, obviously, pick your battles, and also with some data and some sort of evidence to back up what you're saying. You know, be their critical friend, push back on things, don't just say yes. They're surrounded by yes people anyway, they don't need another one. And be curious, and the fact that you're here today shows that you are, in terms of seeking out inspirations, learn from connected worlds, see what the marketeers are doing, and learn from all of those. So, finally, don't forget, and I think you all know this, an internal communicator's role, change of font there, is to deliver value rather than just deliver content. So you need to be strategic to earn your seat at the table. Think about how strategic you are being. I've got no idea if we've got time for questions. Anybody going to tell me? 5 minutes? 5 minutes for questions. So, any questions? Can't see. No. In that case, anybody? That must have been extremely well explained then. If you have got any questions, come and see me over lunch. Otherwise, last thing to do is see who's going to win the book. So A, B, C, D, E. First person to shout out what D stands for. Yay, there we go. I'll bring it over, thanks.